I'm continuing my spring gobbler scouting, very early for spring gobbler scouting. I always like to start in the middle of March. I'm here on public land, continuing my public land scouting today. Uh, Scouting turkey, but I'm also scouting deer. A couple things you can look for, obviously sheds. Should be a good amount of sheds on the ground. It's March 14th. So I've come across numerous amounts of sheds while I was scouting turkey. But also it's a great opportunity to scout deer because you could see the deer sign that was going on during the rutting periods, October, November, and in December. You can, there's still no leaves on the trees, and it's easy to see and pick up on things. Also, I like to look at areas that have new cuttings. Turkeys would obviously go in there and roost, but deer obviously are going to use that for browse area. So number one, look for areas for scouting in the spring for deer that have new cuttings, maybe the previous years or maybe only 2 or 3 years old. Cuttings where there's trees that are only popping up maybe a foot or two off the ground. Those are best because the deer can browse it easier. There are a variety of different maps that you can use. I know you can go on different states' mapping centers and they'll indicate where that there are new cuttings, and state forest properties also have maps where they indicate where there are new cuttings. And spring's a great time to do it because it's warming up, and you can still see fairly well and see the old trails. What I like to do is once I find areas that have new cuttings, like for instance, where I am right now, this a mixture of mostly big timber and some younger trees. There are some small saplings, and then I guess you would call very early growth. It's 6 to 2 feet high off the ground. It's good for deer browse. But what I like to do is I like to follow the edges of the new cuttings and where it meets up with the bigger hardwoods. So that's what we call edge, or a change in habitat type or vegetation type from a clear cut or an area that was clear cut that's only a year or two, maybe 3 years old, and where it hits the big timber. Obviously the turkey, I found that turkey like to be in the bigger woods in the springtime so they can see other turkey, and they're strutting around and doing their spring mating activity, and the predators are always trying to sneak up on turkeys and things. So the open woods are probably where you'd find most turkey, but for the deer, they'll be running along that edge between the open woods and the cutting, the fresh clear cut area. And just out behind the camera here, there's an area that was clear cut maybe 2 years ago, and I plan on, before spring green up here within the next couple weeks, going over there and walking the edges of it, trying to find out where the deer are coming in, and looking on aerial photos and seeing where the agriculture areas are and where deer might be coming from the night in the morning early into those areas to bed, where they'll obviously have browse for bedding. So keep in mind, if you're out scouting around the spring, and turkey season's coming up, but it's still another opportunity to scout for deer, because if you target areas that have change in habitat, where you have big hardwood trees, large timber, and then the clear cuts that are near it, you walk those edges and you can have two things. You'll find trails entering and going in and out of those areas, and 3, you may find a lot of sheds and areas that deer are moving from ag fields to the clear cut timber. So give it a shot, but the clear cut timbers and the early vegetation will hold a lot of deer come fall.